Hey everyone, it's Amber from The Sensible Mama, and I've got Charlie here with me today.
Hey there.
Today we're going to be talking about something that I guess I should probably give a content warning for. We're going to be speaking about sex.
Do tell.
Sex.
That's sexy.
So just to give a little bit of a content warning, we're going to be talking about navigating sex in relationships and marriage in particular. We're going to talk about some kind of tricky issues around rejection sensitivity, around codependency, around coercion, and then ultimately leading into a conversation about getting on the same page with each other through communication and open dialogue and things like that. But we will touch on some sensitive topics, I think. So just something to know in advance. I will leave some timestamps down below so that you can kind of skip around if there are parts that you don't want to see.
It will be PG-13, I'm sure.
Absolutely, but there are people who have triggers and traumas around this topic, and so we just want to make sure they can skip around to things that they may not want to be confronted with today.
Okay.
Yes. Also, I thought about whether we should use code words as we go through this, but I realized just as a consumer of content, I find that to be really annoying. So we're just going to we're going to call it sex, we're going to talk about sex, and I'm not going to edit anything out. I'm just going to trust that this video or this podcast is going to land where it needs to land, even though it might get suppressed. So if you know someone who needs to see this, send it to them. That would help out in the algorithm, because I imagine we're going to get suppressed a little bit with this one. So, Charlie, where to begin? I guess we should start like right at the beginning, which was right when we got engaged and we moved in together after moving here from Memphis. Mm-hmm. And as I'm sure you recall, we had a little bit of, it was like a difficult time for us sexually, even right there at the beginning, because we had already had sex prior to marriage. But when we got engaged, I had this like conviction on my heart that we should wait, like we should take this time of our engagement and be pure and not have sex during that time. And I'll admit now that was very steeped in some religious stuff, but it was important to me. And at that time, it was something that you really couldn't concede to.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that period of time was a good representation of my insecurity, right? I don't think that I felt that I was waiting for you to wake up and realize that I'm not the right guy. And
well, what do you mean by that? Like
that you would eventually, I mean, you're extraordinarily beautiful and I'm not, type of thing, So I kind of looked at, the hammer's going to drop on this relationship. But there's the flip side, which is, I have such a high value on intimacy that it was like a barometer for me to check about how we were doing, right? Mm-hmm. As long as we were having sex, the relationship was good and I was safe. And for not having it, it was like, it brought out insecurities.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember at that time not really believing you. I remember being angry and feeling like I was, my sort of convictions were getting trumped by your need for sex. And the way that I conceptualized that was like, this man is just obsessed with sex and he doesn't want to give up sex. And I remember that being really, really hard to get my mind around. And we had a lot of fights about that.
Yeah. And it's, it's cyclical, because when you resist more, I chase more, mm-hmm. right? Because the resistance means rejection and vulnerability, and the insecurities get stronger and stronger. And I chase more and more, or I try to make, my reality, so to speak, instead of just trusting that you were with me for me.
Yeah, because back then, I mean, we have always had a wonderful relationship in terms of like, I mean, we were best friends first. We've always connected so well mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all those things. So for you, it was like even despite all those other things being so good, that we were happy, we were engaged, we were planning a wedding, for you, that still wasn't enough to say, like, yes, I'm secure, I'm safe in this relationship.
Right. Yeah. I don't think at that time there was anything you could do to convince me that you were in it for the long haul.
Even with even with a ring on my finger.
Yeah, you were going to wake up eventually, right? And you were going to say, he's an older guy. We've grown up in different times, and maybe the relatability would be a factor. As it proved, it has not been. But it was those early concerns, because we were new in our relationship too. So it was the early concerns about, you can have anybody you want. Why me? So so why me, right?
And so that kind of started, that was kind of the beginning of sexual problems for us in our marriage. And we weren't even married yet. For me, it was.
Yeah, I think that there was a period of time where you tried to make me feel really secure. Mm-hmm. And, you got your freak on quite a bit during that time. I don't think there's anything that could have been done at that time to bring me security. No matter what you said, or no matter, how much sex we would have had. The insecurity is something that is deep within me. It had nothing to do with you, right? And, just being a stupid guy, thinking that as long as we're having sex, everything must be good because this is the ultimate expression of love.
Mm. And we've had that conversation a lot. And what's really interesting, because we're going to circle back to this towards the end of the podcast, is at that time, one of the things that we decided to do, and this was once we were married, we kind of made our way through that discomfort during the engagement. And I just what I ended up doing was putting my convictions aside, because putting my spiritual convictions aside was easier than having this fight with you about sex. And I didn't want to enter into my marriage already having this problem. And as we learned as the years went on, that fact of me putting my spiritual convictions aside kept coming back up, Yeah. But at the time, one of the things, after we got married, one of the things that we decided to do, and I think this was actually after we'd had Roman. So we now had like an 8-month-old or something, and sex was not very common because I was up all night with the baby and you were up all night working, and we were exhausted, but you still wanted sex and I didn't. And so one of the things we decided to do at that time, do you remember?
No.
We decided to make a sex schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I want to talk about this because now that our marriage is healthy, we have a sex schedule and it's working. But back then, when we tried that, it failed spectacularly.
Yeah, I don't recall why it failed.
It was a number of reasons. There was the fact that it had to be scheduled in the first place.
Yeah. Which I'm not a big fan of scheduling. I like the spontaneity, but I have to admit that there's the insecurity side of me that can relax as a result of it, the schedule.
But a thing that came up for us was you would say, so it was a circular problem, right? Because to begin with, we had already made the wrong choice, because you don't make a sex schedule to fix your sex life. That's never the answer. So that was mistake number one. And then where we sort of circled the drain was it would be a night where we were supposed to have sex. And you would be in the mood and you had planned on it all day long, looking forward to it. And because I was exhausted, and because by then I was already starting to be unhappy in our marriage, I spent the whole day dreading it. Mm. So when the evening came around, I remember standing in the bathroom, looking in the mirror and just being like, just go do it. This is your husband. You love him. Just go do it. This is the night you have to do it. And then you have time. You'll have a few days to not have to do it again. Just go do it. And I would come out and you would instantly see it. You would see it on my face and it would hurt you.
Yeah. Well, we've learned later that, you know, you had to deal with a double whammy, right? So I have this insecurity, and then we discovered I have ADHD, which enhances your rejection sensitivity or magnifies it. So, you know, it's bad enough that I'm feeling insecure, but feeling rejected is like, for someone with ADHD, could be extraordinarily stressful.
And yeah, and so that was where we would get this circular problem where I would come out and I would see your face fall, and I would be like, and I would get triggered, and so then I'd be like, what is the problem? And you'd be like, well, I
had these plans.
Yeah, and I'd be like, well, you're getting it, you get to have sex tonight, right? And you would say, I want you to want it, I want you to desire it. And I would be like, it's hard to desire something that is mandatory, right? And we were both hurting so bad.
Yeah, I didn't want obligatory sex.
Yes.
And at that time, I was not able to read the room, or I wouldn't even attempt to, because I was battling my own insecurities, right? And trying to make sure that the selfish me was getting what he wanted, to reassure me. It wasn't about the sex, right? It was about the ultimate display of unity for me. And as we learned later on, I found out that I'm a demisexual, which was a new term to me, but I started exploring that. And I'm, you know, the intimacy and the passion and the love is what really gets me excited.
So I'm gonna, for people who don't know what demisexual means, I'm gonna give like a blanket kind of definition of it, and then could you? I think it's there aren't a lot of men who talk about being demisexual. Often it's women I hear talking about it. So I'm gonna give this definition, and then I'd love for you to talk about your experience with being demisexual.
Yeah.
So demisexual basically means that you experience attraction, like sexual attraction, pretty much exclusively through feelings of love and intimacy and romance. So a demisexual person really has a hard time experiencing a strong sexual attraction or connection unless there is a pre-existing romantic connection there.
Yeah.
So explain what that's been like for you.
So it's probably a little bit more than that. So when I think about our relationship, and you would talk, or you would say you love me, or you would, you know, say anything about the sanctity of our marriage, I would get aroused. It's like the strangest thing. You can just give me a word or an affirmation about your commitment, and I would get aroused, right? So I often thought that was strange. I didn't know why that was. I thought it was remarkable. Remarkable. It has happened a lot. And then I think that, you know, it doesn't mean I can't have sex with someone I don't love. It doesn't mean I can't have, you know, I can't take care of myself, so to speak, because there's still the, you know, stimulus and response mechanism that works. But the fulfillment, the excitement, the real turn on is when there's that, when love's involved. So, you know, if can I talk about you know, naughty videos?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if you know, part of my childhood, I grew up with you know, a very sick man in my life who would constantly show off porn. And, you know, these were, you know, the man-oriented videos that were made to arouse men. I never really got excited over it. But what I found out is that there is an element that has passion in it, and watching passion is exciting. Not necessarily the act or the moaning and the groan. That doesn't do for me. But when I see there's a connection and an intimacy and an incredible love, I get really excited. So, sorry, I'm sharing too much information. Probably not what you expected, but you know, you gotta try and understand where I came from. It all compounded. So take the fact that I am turned on by affection, and you don't want affection, right? You don't want it right now, and take the fact that I have rejection sensitivity, and you don't want it right now, and take the fact that I have insecurity, right? So in my head, it spiraled into a scenario where I was constantly chasing you, right, to validate me.
Yeah, and I can remember those times. Like, so I feel like now we've kind of, in my mind, we've fast forwarded a little bit to further on in our marriage. Like, I'm thinking now about when we were in our house, not in our first apartment, and Roman and Abby were born. And this was when I remember, like, really a lot of sexual problems happening for us.
Well, I think what you struggled with is I was very sick. And no matter how sick I was, I always found room to want to have sex.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I remember us talking about that. Because I would be like, okay, so you're too sick to help me with dinner. You're too sick to put the dishes away. You're too sick to change the light bulb in the fan like I asked, but you're okay to have sex.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened, right? So I would work, I would come home, every ounce of this disease I had took its lifeblood out of me. And when I got home, I was in my safe place. I just nodded off, I checked out. I was an absentee father during that time. And then I would be upstairs, and I would have this other side of me that, you know, this guy is so defeated because he's so sick with a chronic disease. And then I have this other side where, well, you know, as long as she loves me, it's okay. So you know, any opportunity to make that connection, you know, I wanted to.
And, you know, this isn't the topic of this podcast, but since we're here, I kind of want to talk about this because your chronic illness is classified as an invisible illness. Is it okay if I say what you have?
Yeah.
So Charlie has Crohn's disease and colitis. Your Crohn's disease and colitis led into rheumatoid arthritis,
sacroiliitis?
No, you never pronounce it right. Hillary taught me how to pronounce it. Sacroiliitis.
Yeah.
Sacroiliitis. So you had that, you had spine pain,
Mm-hmm.
you had all kinds of things. And every one of those things, and not to mention all of the indignity
Yeah.
of the bathroom problems.
And the side effects of the medication. And
Right.
It was just, you know, I'm in remission now. And, you know, I can never have it again in my life, which would be great. Right? So, you know, but you're always on guard.
Yes. But all the things that you experienced until they're like at the very end where things got like debilitatingly bad for a long time through the first many years in our marriage, when you weren't in active flare-up, your illness was invisible.
Right.
And I, as your partner, was so just lost in my own world, lost in my own self-pity about how hard motherhood was, about how just unprepared I was for how hard being a mom was, that I didn't take the time to learn about your illness, right? So, and we've talked about this a lot, like, I think things would have been a lot different if I had taken time to understand what an invisible illness is, and understand also the shame that surrounds illnesses like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, that causes people who are sick with that disease to act like everything is okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly what you do. You hide because you don't want to talk about it. Right?
Yeah, who wants to talk about those kind of bathroom scenarios with the person that they want to have sex with later?
That's exactly right. I mean, I didn't speak to anybody. Nobody knows the extent of the despair. You know, I do remember one time being suicidal over it. The pain, the sweat coming off, you know, just the agony. I'm like, I can't live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I was on every medication known to man, and nothing worked. And, you know, then, it goes into remission and you live a happy life. I get to meet someone like you. We're having a normal, and then bam, it hit again right after we got married, right?
Yeah.
And it was horrible.
And the thing was, like, to bring it back to our sex life, from my perspective, not understanding your illness, not understanding what you were going through every day, and that was on me. That was my fault. But because of that, what I saw through my eyes was a husband who came home from work every day, fell asleep on the couch, didn't help with anything, left me alone, putting the kids to bed a lot of not all the time. It's not like you never helped, but it was often enough that I felt very alone. And then when I would walk up the stairs to get in bed after closing down the kitchen, cleaning up, all that stuff, coming back upstairs and seeing you waiting in the bed, and I knew what you wanted,
Yeah.
it would set me off.
Yeah, that part, so I can understand why it would set you off after seeing how sick I was, and how checked out I was. But it was also like I put a lot of pressure on you too. Like you would go take your bath and I would wait.
Yeah, and I would know you were out there expecting it when I got out.
Yeah, needing the validation, right? Needing that, and therapy helped a lot with understanding where that came from. So fortunately, we don't have anything near that today.
Yeah, well, because I hear from women on social media who talk about, I don't recall you really doing this, but women talk about, like, I'm scared to get in the shower. Like, I wait to have my shower until he leaves for work or until he's asleep, because nudity, like my nakedness, is unsafe with him, because if he sees me naked, he's gonna expect sex, and if I don't give it to him, then it's my problem, and we didn't really have that, but that's something that's really common that I hear about a lot from women.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. Men, they have a hard time controlling that desire, and they need to learn. They need to grow up and learn it a little bit better. So it's a journey, but the only way I can relate to that is, like, part of being a demisexual. I would say to you, why don't you grab my ass when you walk by, or get a little frisky. And your response was very eye-opening. This is because I would do it if it didn't lead into anything, because today's not the day, and I have to show you that it doesn't have to. We can mess around, we can flirt, we can do a lot of kinky things during the day, and it doesn't have to end up into a marathon or anything like that.
Say more about that, because I think that a lot of women are going to send this video to their husbands or watch it with their husbands, and this is so important. This has so radically changed our marriage in terms of me knowing that I can come and flirt with you and be sexy and not feel like you're going to try to have sex with me right then. Yeah,
and these little displays of affection, like when you walk past me and then you moon me.
I do that when he's on phone calls.
I love that, right? It's not like I'm dropping everything I'm doing and I'm going to ravish you in the room. But it just like fills me up, like that we can tease each other and know everything is good. So, one of the wisest things you did therapy helped my insecurity. So I have to give credit to that first. That fixed a lot of stuff, and I can go into a little bit more detail of the codependency as well. But I think that you said to me, you know what? You don't have to worry about rejection. You can have me anytime you want. And it was like an instant relief. What has happened, it calmed me down so much. It made the relationship healthy. And because I'm not chasing and expecting, I'm having more. It's weird, right? It's because it's mutual now as opposed to one way.
And importantly, that was something that I could only say to you after lots of therapy for both of us, and lots of healing and growing and learning how to communicate and fixing our relationship out of the bedroom. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Made it to where I could say that, like, hey, you know what? You can initiate sex with me whenever you want to. And the only reason I was able to say that is because after the therapy and the conversations and the hard shit we went through, you proved to me that you were able to pay attention to what my day was like, pay attention to how I was feeling and what I had going on. And you demonstrated that you had learned me. And I've learned that you now won't ask if you can tell, you won't initiate, I should put it that way, if you can tell that I've had a bad day.
All right.
And that was something that we didn't have before.
Yeah. And I mean, if there was a time where, you know, you're my best friend, right? And I like doing those things with you. But if I was like really, really in the mood, I'm like, no, I'm really in the mood. Okay, then let's get you all satisfied is your attitude, right? As opposed to me fearing the initiation and being rejected. Because the worst thing for me was the rejection. It was the no. It would set me off and say, okay, she's falling out of love with me. It was this stupid barometer that I set the temperature of our relationship at, right? It was the measure by which I knew the relationship was good or not, and it was just absolutely a misguided thought.
Well, I don't think you should call it stupid, and I don't think you should invalidate it, you know, because it wasn't stupid or invalid. It was where you were in your own brokenness. That was where you were before you were healed, before you went to therapy and did the hard work you did, right? So I don't think you need to invalidate the fact that you use sex as a barometer. I think you need to just acknowledge that, like, that was what you needed then.
I think a lot of guys do it though, and I think that you know, part of the obsessiveness over sex could be an insecurity or rejection sensitivity, like it was in my case. I'm not going to generalize and say all men are like that. That's probably not true. Some men are just selfish and want what they want. But I think that when you're in a truly committed, loving relationship and you give a shit about your significant other, right, and you want them to get the most out of the relationship as well, it changes things and changes your perspective a little bit.
Do you think it's possible that, like, some of the men who do this stuff that women hate so much, which is like, sex is my right, I'm owed this, I work all day, you need to give this to me, which is so triggering for women. Do you think that for some men, maybe that is men are not allowed often to say how they really feel when they're vulnerable. Men are taught to have to beat their chests and be manly, or else they're a beta soy boy, right? Do you think that for some men, they fear being vulnerable enough to say, I need sex because I worry that you don't love me if you don't? And so instead of saying that, the opposite of vulnerable is too strong, right? So to be like, I need this, I demand this.
Yeah. There's also ignorance at play with some younger men, I would imagine. It's because as a younger guy, and I'm going to put it on me, not humanity, as a younger guy, that's all you could think about, that's all you want. And that deep-rooted thought in misogyny and that's what makes you a man. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's what the, you know, kids in the locker room are talking about, and all the jokes are sexual innuendos. And, you know, it's like, you know, I'm not a man unless I'm, you know, pursuing that. So men are constantly on the hunt for their next conquer, right? And they would be surprised that they wouldn't have to do that if they, you know, we're just good guys.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Because now I want to talk about that, but I want to go back and say the one thing that I was thinking while you were saying that, which is that this is why feminism says patriarchy hurts everyone.
Absolutely.
Because it's patriarchy that teaches men that they are the most manly if they're getting sex.
Right.
And sadly, men's anxious pursuit of sex in order to validate themselves that they are men causes them to get rejected.
Yeah, and they may not even be realizing that the pursuit is to validate their manliness. It may be just, a reflex, like a sneeze, right? I'm horny, I need sex, and you're the only one I'm allowed to have with, so you give it to me, right?
Yeah, but I truly do think even in marriages, men, again, kind of like you said, have been taught that the barometer for how sexually appealing they are, how manly they are, how desirable they are, comes down to how much sex they're getting. And so rather than dealing with deconstructing these harmful ideas that are put on boys from a very young age, that their worth is in how much, I almost said a word I shouldn't say, how much sex they're getting, instead of really doing the work to deconstruct that, they lean into it and they just keep on chasing getting more and more sex because that means I'm a man.
Yeah, well, everything, revolves around the male ego. And it is not necessarily their fault.
No.
It's societal. It's the patriarchy. Even in, my mother and grandmother were the other two most important women in my life. And I remember my grandmother saying to me, because my mom divorced when I was really young, I was like 11, maybe 10. And she said, you're the man of the house now. And put this in, and she meant well. She wanted to uplift me, saying, you're growing up, you're the man of the house. But it put such an overwhelming sense of responsibility on me that I had 3 or 4 paper routes. I was chipping into the house. And it's even when good intentions happen, the patriarchy slips in,
Yeah.
It does. And that's what happened.
Yeah, because you did not deserve at that young of an age to have that burden put on you. I mean,
Right.
Roman is 7. He's only 4 years younger than you were.
Yeah.
When that burden was put on you. And I can't imagine.
Yeah. And so, everything is revolved around our ego. Whether we're a good provider, whether we're getting enough sex, whether we're we're desirable socially, how well we're achieving in our career. Everything is about our ego. And for some, a lot more than others. And I think if most men will sit down and try to introspect, they will say that, yeah, there is probably a lot of ego at play here, but even in myself, right? Of course there is, but some men it's more pronounced than others, right? Where they become just absolute assholes,
Yeah.
and they abuse their platforms, and as we've been seeing, or they're just checking off the conquest. They're setting up social to attract. Women, I see it all the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because what you said before was like, and the pursuit of all that sex and all of that validation, it actually leads to more rejection.
That's right.
And for sure, in our marriage, we have, and I should say, when we were sexually active before we were married, and during that time, we were incredibly spontaneous and explorative and kinky and all kinds of crazy stuff. And that was really fun. And then as life happened and as other parts of our marriage outside of the bedroom fell apart, and then our sex started to fall apart, and then your insecurity around sex came in, it destroyed sex for us.
Well, yeah. So I remember reading some comments from men on your social about how, women are supposed to, pretty much give it up, right? And, at a man's whim. There's such a misconception among many men, that thinks that the chase, the pursuit, makes them more manly. When the vulnerable, the sensitive, but simultaneously strong men show up, the experiences women have from all of these other men, maybe weighs against a potentially good guy as well, right? So the guys aren't doing themselves any favors, right? How hard and how terrible it must be to be a woman in this world wondering what that person's motives are, right? Every day you have to wonder what that person's motive. This is twice I bumped into them this week. Is it happenstance, or are they making that happen, right? And it's because they're thinking with the wrong head.
And you're right, because the worst thing for a woman is to go out and experience that in the world all day long. That man is walking too close behind me. Is he about to drag me into that alleyway? I saw a Instagram video from a man that said, isn't it interesting that if a man walked into a room full of women, he would be over the moon happy, but if a woman walked into a room full of men, she'd be terrified.
Yeah.
And so women live in this world all day long, and men on social media love to pretend like that's not real, even though they've never walked in the shoes of a woman and understand what we go through every single day. But to live out there in that world, constantly dealing with sexual contact, sexual harassment, sexual eyes at you, all of these things, and then come home and have your husband, who loves you the most in the world, do that to you also, to come home and feel like I have to be ogled by my husband, I have to be groped by my husband, and if I say don't do that, I don't want that, we get yelled at. We get told that we're being unfair wives and prudes, and we're being ungrateful.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that caught my attention was not one, but many men coming into your post saying, oh, you women are all great before you get married, and then you stop giving it after you get married. And, to me, that's like so immature, right? That, sex is it's a longevity thing. It's a part of health and wellness and mental health and relationship health. And by putting such a pressure on women to make it obligatory, it takes away the value of it. And, it's no wonder women are losing interest in it, because it's like that seems to be the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Right? So the message to guys is make her matter, and you watch what happens to you.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. And I will say, to be fair, I am sure that there are some women who use sex to get a man to commit to her, and then once she has him, she stops having sex. I believe that probably happens. But I would say that in far, far, far more circumstances, what has actually happened is that woman had a strong sex drive when the man was pursuing her. Isn't it? You can flip this right around.
Right. You stopped giving flowers after we got married.
That's right. When the man was pursuing her and courting her, and doing all of the things that men do in the beginning to secure a woman, she was very interested in sex. And as the man, and I'll be fair again, life circumstances change too, right? Children come into the picture. Illness, bigger jobs than what you had before. So that's part of it. But you could also say that women end up not enjoying sex anymore because their husbands are expecting it, are giving no romance in return, are not doing anything to ignite their wives' sexual fire. And I remember, sorry.
No, go finish.
I was just going to say, I remember this meme that I saw on Twitter where this guy thought he ate, right, with this post that he made, and it was like a picture of a celebrity woman. I don't know who it was. And like, this was her when she was a 20-year-old, and then she got married a few years later, and this was her now. And like, she looked beautiful and glamorous in the first photo, and she was like a mess in the second photo. And he said, women before marriage and women after marriage right? And his point was that women let themselves go after they get married, right? And someone commented beneath, and I will never forget this. They said, the first picture is how her parents treated her, and the second picture is how you treat her.
Yeah. Just for any man to do that to a woman, to attack their looks or their presence before or after, because life for a woman is very hard. You bear children, hormonal surges during pregnancy, lack of sleep, all that stuff. That, as you mature, you start realizing, yeah, I wouldn't want that. So, but there's another aspect of relationships that may be contributing to a problem in the sex life, and women don't talk about it a lot, but some women don't get anything out of it because their men are selfish. Their men are more focused about their end game than hers, right? So orgasms are a learned thing. It's something that you learn, and as your significant other, all I care about is making sure that you're satisfied, and I know it'll return in spades.
So I want to get on to like how we have kind of fixed things and what we do now. I want to talk about our schedule because a lot of people have questions about our sex schedule. But could you just real quick, since you've touched on that, can you talk about, you said it's a learned, like giving women orgasms is a learned thing. Can you talk about some of the things that you've done to learn, like some of the research that you did?
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of great, if you would just read, right? And I'm not talking about smut magazine. I'm talking about like real psychology of women, and if you would try to understand, so when I was being rejected, when I was, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong, I need to know everything, right? So I start researching and I start reading and I start understanding, oh, I see. And you start putting two and two together, and it was a journey. I'm still learning, but it was a lot of book reading.
It was a lot of book reading, and there was a lot of practicing. And this is interesting because I can remember this was after our separation.
I'm wondering where this is going. Practicing?
No, it's a good thing. It was after our separation. We had gotten back together. And I remember you were like, I read something about what to do with your fingers.
Oh, yeah.
And this is so strange looking back on it, because I remember that night feeling very much like a science experiment. But you kind of said that. You were like, this is not... I just need you to let me try something, and I need you to tell me where it feels good and where it doesn't. And we're once again off track from what I wanted to talk about, but I think this is important. Let just keep walking, and the path will reveal itself. And I think we've stepped into a new path here. But like, nothing about sex ed or anything that you read or see in television or even in smut pornography and whatnot, nothing ever centers the experience of women. Nothing ever truly centers us learning about our bodies and us communicating what we need and what we want. I remember being a teenager and picking up 17 magazine, and there would be articles about like, what are the noises that men like most. And so teaching you how to perform theater during sex. Sex was about theater. How big of a show could you put on? And I remember this, so I would have been at this point in my 30s, right, 35, 36 years old, when we have this night where you said, I'm going to do some things, and I just need you to tell me when it feels good. And it was so uncomfortable for me, because that was probably the first night ever in our marriage. We had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old at the time. It was the first time ever in our marriage where I told you, yes, that feels good. Move to the right a little.
Yeah.
Up some.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. It's like, how could we have gone that long without communicating?
Because women think that the way that we're communicating is with our noises, right? So, like, oh, I'm focusing on making sure I'm performing the right way for him. But when he gets somewhere where it feels good, I'll let out one of those moans that I read in 17 magazine is like the one that men like. And then he'll know that he's in the right spot and that feels good.
Yeah. I don't like that. I can sense phony, like almost immediately.
Yeah, and I'm not saying all women do this, but because I've had some friends who are very, very good at communicating, but that wasn't my experience. I was never taught that even my enjoyment mattered.
Yeah, so that's what got me down the rabbit hole. My insecurity in my mind is like, okay, I have to make her look forward to sex.
Yes.
So be the best you can possibly be. Learn everything you possibly can. I read books. There were great articles by some, professionals on Medium, and I would just read this sexology stuff up and trying to really understand, anatomy, trying to understand, psychology, and it was it's a journey, but it's not a self-absorbed one. It's more of a giving one now, because I find that if I give you the right stuff, it comes back tenfold, and that's what these guys gotta understand. You just gotta do the right things, and you'll get everything you want.
Yeah, you can't be a selfish lover and then expect someone to keep wanting to come back for more.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot, right? Because I've been making some content on TikTok and Instagram about our sex schedule, and it's been received with mixed reviews. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about it, because we talked about at the beginning of this podcast about the time that we tried a schedule with sex and how spectacularly it failed because we had other issues that we needed to fix first in our marriage. And we've talked about that, and we went to therapy, we learned each other, we did all these things. So now we are in this healthy marriage. We are so happy and fulfilled. We've learned how to communicate with each other. And one of the things that we've decided to do is to have this sex schedule. And a lot of women are very triggered when I begin talking about this because, and valid, so valid, because so many men would hear the word scheduled and think mandated, think required.
Yeah, it's a suggestion. It's not a schedule, it's a suggestion.
Yeah. So what we've done, for those who haven't seen my other videos, is that one of the things we discussed is that I said, listen, I enjoy sex, but I know that you would have sex every single night if you could, and I cannot do that. And so without knowing that there are nights when it's just off the table, then that means that every night I'm wondering if you're expecting it. And every night I'm kind of sizing up where my sex drive is, right? And so I said, I just would love to have 2 nights a week that are off the table. No matter how much either of us want to have sex on those nights, we will not. We will abstain. And I'll just say, I want to say this right now, that has been huge for my mental health. To have 2 nights where I know it is not on the table, I don't have to worry about overexerting myself in my workout, like if I want to do a really hard legs workout.
Yeah.
And that's been huge.
Yeah, and it's not like we're having sex for the other 5 nights either. It's just like, these are the 2 where, okay, I can go off and work a little later that night. You can decide not to shave your legs if you didn't want to shave your legs.
Which, let's make it clear that you don't care about my legs being shaved, but I have a hang up about that.
I could care less, but apparently all the guys on the internet care.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's just things like that. You just want to. I get it. Today's the day. It's mine. I want to read a book. I want to take a bath. I just want to. One thing I learned about you is your need for alone time, right? And just being like, okay, we're here together, but we're you know, in different rooms, or we're even sitting right next to each other, and there's no expectations. I see how it has liberated you.
Absolutely. And so we set aside 2 nights a week for not sex. And then we have 2 nights a week that we never made a hard and fast rule about this, but we have our 2 nights a week that are date nights for us. Like Wednesday nights, we stay in, we get the kids to bed, and we have some wine, and we hang out. Sometimes we do yoga together in here, and then we watch our favorite shows, and we have sex that night. Like Wednesday night, we always can count on sex. And then one of the weekend nights, we have our date night out, and that's always a sex night too. And we both look forward to that.
And there's maybe 1 or 2. Yeah, it's not every week though, but there's maybe another day in the week where it's just like, you know, yeah, let's go.
Well, yeah, and that's what I've been discussing, is that there's 2 nights a week where it's off the table.
Yeah.
2 nights a week where we definitely do have sex,
Right.
because it's been a date night and there's
the others
romance.
are spontaneous.
And the others are spontaneous.
Yeah.
And it works so well for us.
Yeah, it's really good. It takes it helps me with my insecurity. It helps you with your alone time. On the days that we know it's fair game, we know like for Wednesday. Wednesday is our night, so we know like we could tease all day long. The anticipation of it. So I don't want people to get the impression that, you know, there's no spontaneity. Sex is much better when it lasts throughout the entire day, and then coming together is the, you know, fireworks at the end of the night.
So to kind of just before we wrap up, there's a few questions here that I asked from people on Instagram. We've touched on quite a few of them. But one of the things that someone asked was what to do when you have conflicts in your marriage that you can't seem to work through, and how does that relate to sex?
For us, it was a big event, right? For us, the conflict in our marriage resulted in a separation, and the separation was required for each one of us to do individual growth. And then when we came back together, a lot of those challenges weren't as big of a challenge anymore. It's very hard to row a boat that's leaking. Right? So you have to go back into your neutral corners. You have to lick your wounds. You have to reprioritize, and then start dating again. Come back and make it a focus to, you know, try to clean that slate, let go of the past, and come back again. And I think we did that really well.
I think so. And I think that what I would add to that is that I think when there are deeper issues in your relationship that you can't get over, I think sex needs to be something that is not your focus. I feel like, which can be hard when you have one partner or both partners who are really interested in sex, but I think usually it's probably the case that there's one partner who's really wanting sex and the other one isn't. I just kind of feel like sex should not be the thing that you are using as a variable to manipulate in order to see what effect that has on your marriage when you're having problems. I feel like these conversations about, you know, sex schedules and that sort of thing, I think those really are reserved for people who are otherwise healthy and happy in their marriage. I feel like you have to, just like we did, you have to go deal with those other problems first, and you may find that the sex will kind of sort itself out once you get the other problems fixed. But I definitely don't recommend people like we did trying to use sex as a switch that you can flip and see, oh, what did that do to our marriage? Did that help our problems or make them worse?
Yeah, that will never, ever, whatever you do, when your relationship is on the rocks, there's nothing you could do sexually that is going to work towards healing that relationship.
Yeah.
Right? You separate, you have an open, that doesn't help. That compounds, you know, issues related to sex, and it creates baggage and strings. You know, change your lifestyle. You do any of those things that you're thinking that may just give you that spark. You're going at, you're not getting the problem at the roots. You got to focus on the relationship and the intimacy of the relationship. And then if you want to do those kinky things, it's great. But you can't do them thinking that they're going to fix the relationship. That never works.
Yeah. Someone else asked, how do you deal with being awkward with each other sexually, even after years of marriage?
Well, I find it so adorable. When you surrender, when you're at your most vulnerable, that's when I'm in my happiest, right? So those awkward moments that are only privy to married couples or couples in the context of a relationship are very special.
I think to answer the question, like my advice would be communication. I feel like so many awkward things happen because people aren't communicating about what they like and what they want and what they don't like. And that makes for awkward things because like your partner tries something and you're like, you don't like that, and it creates a weird environment. I feel like so many of us were taught that sex is a taboo topic, and so we don't sit down with our partners and talk about what our likes and dislikes are.
I thought you were talking about like a fart in bed.
I don't
as an
think that's
awkward
what
moment.
they meant. Checks notes. I don't think that's what they meant.
Okay, so an awkward sexual experiment, I would imagine.
I think I know this person is someone from my community, and I just feel like what she means is like not feeling completely sexually liberated with each other.
Well,
leave it to a man to think it's about farts.
So that's important, right? My focus in our relationship has to give you liberation and freedom in the bedroom to be whatever it is that you want to be, right? And communication, it has to have communication, and that should be the focus. If I'm not making you feel, free, if you're still like this, you're not surrendering to, the oneness is gone, right? And it's being vulnerable again.
And I will say something that's going to make a lot of women, I think, uncomfortable, but I'm going to say it anyway. When you mention farting, I think the thing that women deal with a lot is like, oh, I don't know if I can say it. Queefing.
I knew that was coming.
And I think, a part of, I'm getting so uncomfortable. Part of the joy of being married is that like it's worse things have happened, and I think for me it was recognizing that like yep, bodies make noise, that part of my body is just a funnel that air gets sucked into sometimes, and air has to come back out of it, and just seeing it as like that is a bodily function, that is just something that's going to happen, I have to deal with it. That helped a lot. We're running out of time because I don't want this to be forever long. There's one last thing that, of all these questions that I wanted to ask you, to kind of leave it on, because I feel like it's a question that a lot of men probably grapple with themselves, and insecure men may use it as a way to coerce women. And that's important to me. So this one woman asked, dealing with loneliness when one partner has a stronger sex drive than the other. And I feel like you're good to answer that because you've been there.
Yeah. When you're in the moment of that loneliness and that insecurity, and there's very little that can fix it, right? It's just, for me, it was an awakening event that showed me that I needed to change. That, the equation had two sides, right? It wasn't just, there were reasons that I had to come to terms with that interfered with that loneliness. So I had to take some accountability for my own loneliness, right? And it's only through introspection and therapy that you discover it. So if you're feeling lonely, you need to explore that a little bit more, because you shouldn't be. And if you are, it may be because of something you're doing or not doing, because you can't put it all on your spouse. It just doesn't make sense.
And what I would add to that, and I think you kind of touched on this at the end there, is that I have had women, and this person is one of them, she's the partner with the stronger sex drive, and her husband doesn't have a strong sex drive. And I would say this for any person of any gender, not just men or women. I do think that, like you mentioned before, unless you are asexual or somewhere on that spectrum, sex is a pretty natural human thing. And I would say that, like, if one partner is not interested in sex and the other one is, I think there's a number of questions that can be asked. One of them is there a hormonal problem? For any person of any gender, is there a hormonal problem that needs to be looked at? Because sometimes it's as simple as you got low sex hormones and you can take something to help you, right? The other one would be, is there something mental or psychological? Is there depression? Is there anxiety? Because those are things that can really impede a person's sex drive.
Medications as well.
Right. Am I on a medicine that's going to do that? Like, those are important questions to ask. And then the third question would be, if one partner is experiencing low sexual arousal, have they always been like that? Or is this new? Because it may be an indication that there's a problem in the marriage, that maybe that person is not communicating, you know?
Communication is absolutely essential, right? So there are so many reasons for this feeling of loneliness. In my case, the feeling of loneliness was self-inflicted, okay? In your friend's circumstance, it may not be. There are situations that medication, mental health, addiction to porn is another, reason why couples aren't coming together.
And we should say we're not anti-porn, but there is
addiction.
There's healthy and there's unhealthy.
Yeah. I'm talking specifically addiction to porn. Yeah, I mean, you do you. Whatever that is, whatever floats your boat. Sexuality is an incredible topic and has so many facets. But an addiction to it will have an impact on the relationship.
I think there's a bunch more questions here, but I feel like we mainly answered all of them. And this has gotten quite long. We're not really all that centered in the frame.
That's all right. Communication key. That's
yes.
it. You got to talk. Got to talk about the vulnerable shit. You got to talk about what floats your boat. You got to talk about what doesn't float your boat.
Yes.
You got to confess to, your challenges. And if you're in a healthy, you want to get in a healthy space, it has to be through communication.
Well, thank you. I know that this was a podcast that was very focused on your sexuality, and so I appreciate you being open and vulnerable and willing to talk about some of this stuff, because I know it's hard, and I'm grateful for the journey that we've gone on together to end up where we are now.
Me too, because I have the best sex life ever.
And with that, all right, guys, thank you so much for checking in. We're going to try to do this semi-regularly, maybe twice a month. These take a little while to edit because somebody is working on his on-camera presence.
I'm really bad. I'm sorry. I'll get more comfortable.
No, you've been lovely. It's just your volume.
My volume.
Your volume. All right. Love you. Mean it always. Mwah. And we'll see you in the next one.